There's a strange pattern most people never notice until it's too late. The harder you push, the further things seem to move away. And the moment you finally loosen your grip, everything starts falling into place almost instantly, not slowly, not after weeks of effort, but the very same day. And that idea sounds uncomfortable at first because it goes against everything you've been taught about effort, control, and success. But stay with this for a moment because what you're about to hear isn't just another motivational thought. It's a shift in how outcomes actually respond to your state of mind. And once you see it clearly, you won't be able to unsee it again. Because forcing, overthinking, and constant checking don't speed things up. They quietly block the result you're trying to reach. And this is where most people get trapped. They believe more action always leads to faster results. But in reality, there is a hidden tipping point where action turns into resistance, where trying too hard starts sending the wrong signal, and life begins to reflect that tension back to you in subtle but powerful ways. Missed opportunities, delayed responses, unexpected obstacles, all stacking up not because you're doing too little, but because you're doing too much in the wrong state. And this is the part no one explains clearly. Your external results are deeply connected to your internal pressure. And when that pressure drops, things can shift far quicker than expected. Sometimes within hours, sometimes within the same day. And that's not luck, that's alignment. A concept often misunderstood because it feels too simple to be real. Yet it shows up again and again in real experiences. Moments when someone stops chasing a reply and suddenly gets a message. Moments when a solution appears right after giving up the struggle. Moments that seem coincidental on the surface but follow a deeper pattern underneath. And in this video, you're going to understand exactly why that happens. What changes in your mind and behavior when you relax, and how that change removes the invisible barriers you didn't even know were there. You'll learn how tension silently interferes with decision-making, how calmness sharpens your awareness, and why trust is not passive at all but one of the most powerful states you can operate from. Because when your mind is clear, your actions become precise, your timing improves, and your presence becomes stronger, and all of that creates outcomes that feel almost effortless compared to the struggle you're used to. And there's also a lesser-known detail most people overlook. Your brain is constantly filtering reality based on what you expect. When you expect delays and difficulties, your attention locks onto problems. But when you relax and trust that things can work out, your brain starts noticing opportunities that were always there but previously ignored. And that shift alone can change your results faster than any extra effort ever could. And by the end of this video, you will not only understand this pattern, but also know exactly how to apply it in your own life in a simple way that doesn't require extreme discipline or complicated routines. Just a small internal shift that can create a visible external change, sometimes within the same day. And that's why watching till the end matters, because missing even one part of this explanation can make the whole idea seem incomplete or unrealistic. But when you see the full picture, it starts to make sense in a way that feels both logical and surprisingly practical. And once it clicks, you'll begin to notice this pattern everywhere, not just in your own life, but in the way things unfold around you. So stay with this, because what comes next might quietly change how you approach everything, from decisions to expectations. And if you're new here, welcome to the channel, where simple ideas are broken down in a way that actually works in real life. And if this kind of thinking speaks to you, make sure to subscribe and stay connected, because this is just the beginning. You try to fix everything, almost automatically, without even noticing how quickly your mind jumps into problem-solving mode the moment something feels uncertain or slightly out of place. And at first it feels responsible. It feels like you are taking control, doing what needs to be done, staying ahead of things before they fall apart. But slowly that habit turns into something heavier, something constant, where every small delay, every unanswered message, every unclear situation becomes something you must solve immediately. And in that process, you start believing that more effort always leads to faster results. That if you just think a little harder, act a little quicker, push a little more, things will finally fall into place the way you want them to. So you push not just physically but mentally. You replay conversations, you analyze outcomes, you try to predict what could go wrong, and then you try to fix those imagined problems before they even happen. And it feels like you are being careful, like you are staying prepared, but what's really happening is your mind never gets a moment to rest. It stays in a loop of tension, always scanning, always reacting, always trying to control something that hasn't even unfolded yet. And that pressure builds quietly. It shows up in your body, in the way your chest feels tight, in the way your thoughts move faster than they should, in the way even small situations start to feel heavier than they are. And the strange part is, the more you do this, the more things seem to slip out of place instead of coming together. Plans get delayed, Responses take longer, outcomes feel uncertain, and instead of moving closer to what you want, it feels like it's drifting further away, like no matter how much effort you put in, something just isn't clicking, and that's where frustration begins to grow, because it doesn't make sense on the surface. You are doing everything right, or at least it feels that way. You are trying, you are putting in the energy, you are staying focused, and yet the results don't match that effort. And that creates a kind of quiet confusion, a question that stays in the back of your mind. Why is this not working the way it should? Why does it feel like the harder you chase something, the more it avoids you? And that feeling becomes even stronger when you notice moments where you stop trying, even for a short time, maybe out of exhaustion or distraction. And suddenly something shifts. A reply comes through, a solution appears, a situation resolves itself without the struggle you were expecting. And those moments feel random, almost accidental, but they follow a deeper pattern that most people overlook. And this is where everything starts to change. Because the truth no one really explains clearly is that forcing things creates resistance, not because effort itself is bad, but because of the state you are in while making that effort. When your mind is tense, when your thoughts are rushed, when your focus is driven by fear of something not working out. That energy reflects in everything you do. Your decisions become less clear. Your timing becomes off. Your communication loses its natural flow. And even when you are doing the right actions, they don't carry the same impact because they are coming from a place of pressure instead of clarity. And that pressure sends a subtle signal, a signal that something is missing, that something is not okay yet, that something needs to be fixed urgently. And life responds to that signal in ways that are not always obvious, but are very real. It mirrors that uncertainty back to you through delays, through complications, through outcomes that feel slightly out of sync. And this is why desperation, even when it feels like determination, often creates the opposite of what you expect, because underneath that push is a belief that things are not working. And that belief shapes the way you see and interact with everything around you. And the more you operate from that place, the more it reinforces itself, creating a loop that feels hard to break. And the simple explanation behind all of this is something most people underestimate. When your mind is tense, your actions become messy, not always in obvious ways, but in small, subtle shifts that add up over time. You might send a message too quickly without thinking it through. You might make a decision based on urgency instead of clarity. You might miss an opportunity because your focus was stuck on something else. And none of these things feel dramatic on their own, but together they create a pattern where things don't flow the way they could. And that's why stepping out of that state changes everything. And this is where the core idea begins to take shape. Relaxing is not giving up. It's not about stopping your efforts or ignoring your goals. It's about changing the state from which those efforts come, because there is a difference between acting with calm clarity and reacting with pressure. And that difference affects everything. Trusting is not being lazy. It's not about sitting back and doing nothing. It's about removing the constant doubt that interferes with your natural ability to respond effectively. It's about allowing your mind to settle so your actions can become more precise instead of more frequent. And when you reach that state, something shifts internally. Your thoughts slow down, your perspective widens, you start to see options you were missing before. You respond instead of react, and that alone begins to change your external results in ways that feel almost surprising at first, because you realize that you are doing less but achieving more. Not because you stopped caring, but because you stopped interfering with your own process. And this is what alignment really means. It's not some abstract idea. It's a very real state where your mind, your actions, and your expectations are no longer in conflict with each other, where you are not pulling in different directions internally. And that creates a kind of clarity that makes everything feel simpler, not because life suddenly becomes easy, but because you are no longer adding unnecessary resistance to it. And when that happens, you begin to notice how many things were already moving in your favor without you realizing it. Opportunities that were there but unnoticed, solutions that were close but overlooked, responses that were delayed not because they wouldn't come, but because the timing wasn't aligned yet. And as you relax into that understanding, you stop blocking what's already trying to reach you. Not by force, but by stepping out of the way. And that shift is subtle but powerful. It doesn't require a dramatic change in your life. It starts with a small change in how you hold your thoughts, how you approach uncertainty, how you respond to things not happening instantly. And as that change deepens, it creates a ripple effect. Your interactions become smoother, your decisions become clearer, your presence becomes stronger, and all of that begins to reflect back to you through outcomes that feel more natural, more timely, more aligned with what you actually want. And instead of chasing results, you start allowing them to come through a state that supports them, rather than resists them. And that is where the real shift happens. Not in what you do, but in how you do it. Not in how much effort you give, but in the quality of that effort. And once you begin to experience that difference, even in small moments, it changes the way you approach everything. Because you realize that the problem was never just about doing more. It was about doing things from a place that actually works with you instead of against you. And that understanding continues to grow the more you apply it, turning what once felt like constant struggle into something that feels more balanced, more clear, and far more effective than the pressure you were used to carrying. You don't need weeks to feel a shift. And that idea can feel strange at first because you have been trained to believe that change always takes time, that results come slowly, that effort must build over days or months before anything moves. But there is another side to this that most people only notice after they experience it themselves. Sometimes the shift happens in hours. Sometimes it happens in a single moment where something inside you finally relaxes, and that small internal change starts affecting everything around you almost immediately. Not in a magical way, but in a very real and practical way that connects directly to how you think, how you act, and how you respond to what is in front of you. And you may have already seen hints of this in your own life without fully understanding it. Those moments when you stop worrying about a situation because you feel tired of thinking about it, and then suddenly something changes. A message appears, a response comes through, a delay clears up, or a solution shows up in a way you did not expect. And it feels almost surprising because just hours before that you were stuck in a loop of overthinking, trying to figure everything out, trying to push things forward, and nothing was moving. And then the moment you step back, even slightly, things begin to shift. And this is not a coincidence. It is a pattern that becomes clearer the more you pay attention to it, because the problem was never time. It was tension, and tension is something that quietly builds in your mind and body without you realizing how much it is affecting your actions, your decisions, your communication, and even your ability to notice opportunities that are already there. And when that tension drops even a little, everything starts to flow differently. Your thoughts become clearer, your responses become more natural, your timing improves, and that creates a chain reaction where outcomes begin to align in a way that feels faster than expected. And that is why the shift can happen the same day, not because something external suddenly changed, but because your internal state changed, and that change removed the resistance that was slowing things down. And once you understand this, you start to see how powerful small shifts can be, because they don't require extreme effort or long preparation. They begin with something simple, something you can do right now without waiting. And that is why this next part matters, because knowing the idea is not enough unless you apply it in a way that allows you to feel the difference for yourself. So try this today, just once, without overthinking it, without trying to make it perfect. Just follow a simple flow and observe what happens. Start by pausing, not in a dramatic way, just a small pause where you stop whatever mental loop you are in and give yourself a moment to step out of it. Then take a deep breath slowly without rushing, allowing your body to settle even if it is just for a few seconds. And as you do that, say something simple in your mind, it's okay, it's already working out, and let that sentence sit there without trying to force yourself to believe it completely. Just allow it to exist as a possibility, and then let go completely, not by pushing the thought away, but by choosing not to chase it anymore, not to analyze it, not to keep checking for updates. Just release the need to control what happens next. And this part is important. Don't check, don't chase, because the moment you go back to constant checking, you bring the tension back, and the whole point is to give your mind and your actions space to move naturally, instead of being driven by pressure. And at first this might feel unfamiliar, even uncomfortable, because you are used to staying engaged with the problem, used to thinking that staying alert and active is what keeps things moving. But as you stay with this practice, even for a short time, you begin to notice subtle changes. Your body starts to feel lighter. The tightness that was there begins to ease. Your breathing becomes calmer, your shoulders relax without you forcing them to, and your thoughts slow down, not completely stopping but losing that rushed, repetitive quality that makes everything feel urgent. And in that calmer state, something important happens. You stop fighting life, not in a passive way, but in a way where you are no longer trying to control every outcome. And that shift changes how you interact with everything around you, because when you are not fighting, you are more open, more aware, more present, and that allows you to respond more effectively instead of reacting impulsively. And that is when life stops fighting you, because the resistance that was coming from your side is no longer there, and what remains is a smoother flow of actions and responses that lead to better outcomes without the same level of effort. And as this becomes clearer, you begin to question the belief that you have always followed. The idea that control is the only way to create results. Because you start to see that too much control creates its own problems. It limits your perspective, it increases your stress, it makes your actions less flexible, and in many cases it blocks the very results you are trying to achieve. And this is where the reinforcement becomes important. Because changing a belief is not just about hearing something new. It is about seeing enough evidence, even in small ways, that allows your mind to accept a different approach. And the more you experience these shifts, the more you understand that you have been taught to control everything, to manage every detail, to stay on top of every situation. But control is not power, not in the way you were led to believe, because true power comes from a state where you are calm enough to think clearly, where you are steady enough to act with precision, where you are confident enough to trust the process without constantly interfering with it. And calm is power because it gives you access to clarity. It allows you to see what matters and what doesn't. It helps you make decisions without being clouded by fear or urgency. And trust is power because it removes the constant doubt that drains your energy. It allows you to focus on what you can do without being overwhelmed by what you cannot control. And when these two come together, calm and trust, they create a state where your actions become more effective, your presence becomes stronger, and your results begin to reflect that change, not slowly, not over a long period of time, but often in ways that feel immediate compared to the struggle you were used to. And as you continue to apply this, even in small situations, you start to build a new pattern, one where you no longer rely on pressure to create progress, but instead use clarity and trust as your foundation. And that pattern grows stronger with each experience, reinforcing the idea that you don't have to force everything to make it work, that you don't have to stay in a constant state of tension to keep things moving, and that in many cases, the fastest way forward is to step back just enough to allow things to align naturally. And as this understanding deepens, it begins to influence not just one area of your life, but many, changing how you approach challenges, how you handle uncertainty, how you respond to delays, and how you move toward your goals with a sense of ease that was not there before. And that is where the real transformation happens, not in a single moment, but in the repeated choice to release tension and return to a state that supports you instead of working against you, allowing each small shift to build on the last, creating a flow that feels more natural, more balanced, and far more effective than the constant pressure you once believed was necessary to move forward. So take this with you today, not as a big rule, not as something heavy you have to follow perfectly, just as a simple shift you allow yourself to try, just for today. No pressure, no forcing, no need to get it right. Just relax a little more than you usually do. Trust a little more than you normally would. And notice what changes, even in the smallest ways. Because sometimes the smallest shift is the one that opens everything else. And you might not expect anything at first. That's okay, just stay with it. Let things unfold without chasing them. Let moments pass without overanalyzing them. And give yourself the space you rarely give. Because that space is where things begin to move differently. That space is where clarity shows up, where answers feel closer, where outcomes start aligning without the usual struggle. And if something shifts, even a little, even in a way that feels small or easy to miss, don't ignore it, because that's how it starts, quietly, subtly, building into something bigger the more you allow it instead of forcing it. And if this way of thinking begins to make sense to you, if you feel even a slight difference in how you see things now, then stay connected, because there's more to explore, more to understand, and more shifts waiting that can change how you approach everything in your life. So take a moment right now and subscribe to the channel, like this video if it spoke to you in any way, and share it with someone who might need this reminder, someone who is trying too hard and doesn't realize that letting go might be the missing piece. Because this is not just one idea, this is the beginning of a different way of moving through life, one where you don't have to fight for every outcome, one where things can come together with more ease than you expected. And this is just the beginning,